Do the astronauts have an opinion about this as a group?
The astronauts would probably fly the shuttle as long as the American people were willing to write the check. I mean, they just want to fly, period. And they'll take any ride, and they will accept tremendous amounts of risk. They understood the risk before Columbia, and more than we did, because NASA tries to make it all look so routine. Having said that, this notion of going to a destination, going back to the moon, really excites the younger generation of astronauts, and rightly so. The bottom line is the shuttle, after 25, approaching 30 years now, the shuttle has not inspired Americans, kids, whatever, as Apollo did, because they were going places.
You said off the air that it's like the White House dog is more important than the shuttle these days.
Yes, I think maybe Bo should be administrator for NASA. Maybe so. At this point, listen, there are no pressing decisions on the desk of the NASA administrator right now, unless they wanted to do something drastic, like keep flying the shuttles. And I think the decision has been made with this sort of benign neglect.
Well, it implies a larger question, which is, what is the space program for these days? What national interest does it serve that it's worth $18 billion or $230 billion?
Well, this is an age-old question. They were asking this question while Apollo 11 was on its way to the moon. This has always been a question. And I think the way to best answer it these days is look at what China and India are doing. They're spending a tremendous amount of money to put their people in space. India, with a per capita annual income of $800, thinks it's important enough to send a probe to orbit the moon and is planning a human-rated rocket.
Is it just prestige, like building nuclear weapons?
I think it is. There is the prestige factor, but there is an X factor which nobody has ever gotten a handle on. How much does this inspire kids? An entire generation of engineers and mathematicians grew out of the moon race. And that's an X factor that's very difficult to quantify. But when you look at competitiveness and you look at where our country is in relationship to our competitors in the world, the space program plays an integral role in inspiring kids to be a part of it. And I think that's an important thing.
Did we ever get anything, though, other than that, out of the moon landing? Yeah, people went up there. The whole country watched on television in the baby boom years. Then they walked around, collected a few rocks, and came back.
We got some good rocks, very expensive rocks. I mean, that's the truth. There wasn't a tremendous amount of science that was conducted. The last mission, Apollo 17, they actually flew a geologist, Jack Schmitt, and there were some scientific experiments done. Those rocks have told them a lot of things about the moon. We know more about the moon's origins, and we know a little bit more about how we might be able to set up camp there in this new regime, which is the idea. The idea is to go there and stay there and learn about how to live there.
And part of the context in the 60s was the Cold War. There was a race against the Russians, and the United States got there first. And I wonder if we're really going to hitch a ride on the Russian space shuttles to get to the space station for the next 5 years. I mean, has the political situation changed recently to the point where relying on the Russians is more problematic than it might have been a year or two ago?
Well, I think we've seen how things can change in an instant as it relates to Russia and in the geopolitical context. I can tell you this, that at the sort of the bench level in the space programs, there's a good working relationship which goes back to the joint operations on the Mir space station. So the space programs integrate well and are operating well and have a good understanding. That next tier and what Mr. Putin and company are going to do next could have a ripple effect on the whole thing. Having said that, I don't think that the U.S. wants to be in a position to upset the Russians so much that we lose our ticket to ride to the space station. It's tricky.